Mr. City Manager, do you want to do a roll call?
Yeah, roll call.
Councilman Leonard?
Finally present. Sorry for being late, everybody.
Thank you. Councilman Daley?
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Duper?
Present.
Councilman Popescu and Mayor Rigsby are absent this evening. They previously declared conflicts on the item that is before you this evening, and the three of you, due to the rule of necessity, are sitting as a quorum for this item. Thank you.
Okay, so sticking with Robert's Rules of Order, we're going to go through this just like we would a normal meeting. We've done the roll call, and now, Mr. City Manager, are there any items to be added or deleted to tonight's agenda?
No, sir.
Any oral reports or public participation? This is a point in time where anyone from the public can speak on an item that is not on the agenda or not up for discussion in front of you tonight. Since we only have one item on the agenda, if you have something to say outside of that, this would be your chance to speak on it. If you'd like to speak on the agendized item, we will get to that here very quickly. So if anybody would like to step forward on anything non-agendized, seeing no takers, we will move on.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, just
yes,
might be a good time for us to remind the public with the heat wave. Although we have a couple, 3 or 4 days of reprieve, it looks like it's coming back. We do typically have some centers in the city, the library and the senior center. We do experience heat emergencies, particularly in our elderly population. So for those that know people, some people don't start their air or don't have access to air, and sometimes it's a little later than they realize they were getting to. So anyway, remind them, people hydrated, stay cool, and we do have some cooling centers in the city if anyone faces that situation.
Thank you, Chief. And a question for you. Do we have informational resources on our website or here at City Hall that people could pick up if they had questions about that type of stuff?
Just the general hours of those facilities, but we'll have our emergency manager post something.
Okay. Thank you. I understand you guys have been pretty busy the last couple of days with the heat.
Yeah, the whole valley has. It's been buzzing.
Okay. So moving on to old business, when continuing our previously discussed item, precise plan of design PPD number 15-128, the construction of a 16-story, 1 million square foot hospital with 157 parking spaces plus 11 designated ambulance parking spaces on a site that provided surface parking located on the northwest corner of Barton Road and Anderson Street, continued from June 14th. Mr. Assistant City Manager.
That was a mouthful, wasn't it? Yes. Okay, we're going to pick off the easy pieces first, if that's all right.
For folks that are in the audience that this may be the first night that they're attending and just trying to catch up to speed, I hate to ask you this, but could you recap on where we are at and
Sure.
what we are continuing tonight?
Sure. We are picking up the precise plan of design and the approvals for the construction of the new hospital building. Typically associated with those, and the City Council is taking the position of the Planning Commission because the Planning Commission is conflicted. So you have already looked at the site design, the building, the architecture, the traffic flow around there, the uses. All of those things would typically be commented on. We've had no comments from the council, and actually had fairly positive comments about those issues, and it appears to be a very beautiful building and well thought out and well designed. So we do have one little piece with the design about traffic and turning lanes from Anderson onto Barton, which we'll cover tonight. The remainder of the discussion is about the conditions of approval. Typically, conditions of approval are associated with a project that is large enough to have impacts throughout the community or in the area. And these conditions then are designed to help mitigate the impacts either during construction or during the operation of the facility. So, and in the recap, I think we've ground through all the conditions other than a handful of them. And so if we can work through the last bits and pieces here, I think we can put this thing to bed.
I just ask it, as you go through them, that you kind of recap the progress and where we started and where we're at.
where we started. Oh, with the conditions as we go? Okay, sure. The first one didn't come out real well, but this is southbound Anderson, and this is Barton Road running this way. The new hospital will be here with emergency room access, the emergency vehicle access on this side, and the applicant is proposing an entrance that will line up with Star Street. Of course, the main entrance lines up with Prospect Street. The traffic engineer looked at this configuration and determined that on the southbound Anderson, turning into the eastbound Barton, there would be too much stacking coming out of this to where the vehicles would kind of hang out the back and block through traffic and right-hand traffic. So the applicant has proposed to widen Anderson one more lane and to provide 2 left-hand turning lanes so that we can cut the stacking distance in half. So that would then give access for non-emergency vehicles to the emergency room, continue the emergency access, and avoid that kind of backup that would stack down the street. I think from a staff perspective, we're okay with that. Our public works director is not jumping up and down and screaming, so we're happy with that one. I think I'm hung up, Kyle. Okay, the rest of it is conditions of approval. First one, condition number 39, was the purchase of handheld radios as part of the operation. The fire chief has worked with Comm Center and some countywide standardizing to where we found other mechanisms to deal with that, so we'd like to remove that condition.
Let me just cap on that. So one of the original conditions was the thought process that if we had a natural disaster or a major incident, as additional resources from other communities, other parts of the state come in to assist us, they aren't necessarily set up with our radios and our communication equipment. And so the thought process was to cache a certain amount of that equipment on site in case of that type of disaster. And what we found out was that our service provider, the county radio group, which provides radios to every agency here in the county, already keeps that cache and has that stuff available in case of emergency, so it was no longer necessary.
That is correct. We've taken care of that internally. The number 42 is a duplicate of 40, so we'd like to remove that. And then the remainder, 36, 37, 38, and 43 are all associated with public safety, fire, and law enforcement. We've met with the applicant. We came up with our conditions. We've had extensive conversations with the applicant. We've met with them and discussed alternatives. We've discussed with the fire chief and the police chief the impacts of these alternatives and how we can meet the city's needs and also be able to meet the institution's needs and not have an onerous impact on that. And the city manager and staff has put, and the applicant has put an extensive amount of discussion into resolving this, and the city manager will be glad to explain the process and what we've come up with.
Okay, at the direction of the City Council, at the last City Council meeting, is to direct the staff to talk to the university hospital and staff to come up with a compromise on this condition with regard to the fire and law enforcement services. With regard to the law enforcement services, in the condition we asked for the hospital to provide or help pay for one deputy 24 hours a day, 1 day,
7
days a week. Okay, and at the same time, due to the cost, about $1.2 million. We met with the University Hospital staff, and they do have demand for their services, for the law enforcement services. But at this time, they don't have enough funding to fund the 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we compromised down to the one deputy, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, to be patrol around the campus, especially around the emergency department. So our operation will be from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's an 8-hour shift. And the shift change is between the 6 to 7 p.m. There will be another shift that come in from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning, that 10 hours, which is for the hospital, that's a peak hour for them when a lot of gang members or people from the outside the city come in to the ER. Any questions? Yeah. Okay. So I work with the county sheriff. Lieutenant gave me the cost to provide one deputy 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. That come out to be $923,000, $285, I'm sorry. Again, this cost of $923,825 is include the salary benefit, and this can be subject to change due to the Board of Supervisors. This dollar amount does not include the fuel and maintenance costs, and usually the county send us the bill for this item every quarter, and we just pass through to them. For the fire protection services, what we did was we listened to the Councilman Ron Daly's recommendation to take a look at the current fire service agreement that we have with the VA hospital. We do have a 5-year agreement with them, of which we use the total agreement divided by the patient beds, and we came up with $900 per patient bed per year. Since this new tower for the hospital will be 633 bed multiplied by 900, we came up with 569,700. This will be at what they planned for, but at the same time, the hospital tower have capacity to go to additional 60 patient bed. That's total 693 beds. So at that time, when the hospital is fully in service with those beds, we can multiply that by 900 per bed, and we have the numbers when those beds are become available. This will provide us with the enhancement to the current staff, will be contribution to the fleet depreciation, and the city will be responsible for the equipment purchases. And again, this will be a 5-year service agreement that will be start at January 1st of 2017 through December 31st of 2021. And the reason we are doing this is because hopefully by the year 4, the new hospital building will be completed, and they will be moving into a new hospital building, and then at that time we can figure out what they plan to do to repurpose the existing building, and we can come back and look at that further. So what we like to do is to replace the current condition of approval with regard to law enforcement will be for the applicant agree to pay approximately $923,285 for the law enforcement, to staff 18 hours per day, 7 days a week, commencing on July 15, 2016, which is pretty much now.
Now, I understand from speaking with you that that the applicant actually wants to bring this up to 24 hours a day?
Yes.
And they have some type of plan to raise that capital
Yes.
to be able to afford that?
We have a last slide that we went over that. So, and this is how we came up with, for the fire services, the applicant and the city shall enter into agreement that the applicant will agree to pay $900 per patient bed per year for the fire services, okay, commencing on January 1st, 2017. And again, this is for a 5-year basis. Now, what we work with them on is the sales tax that we talk about to them about. Currently, the university have a mercantile where we receive the sales tax from the mercantile. We also receive a sales tax from University Medical Center. We also receive a sales tax from Children's Hospital. What we look at is look in the last 3 years.
I'm sorry to stop you again because there's a lot of people out here, plus some reporters and people in the audience. Can you explain exactly what the mercantile does and how that works? Because
Yes.
a lot of people, that's confusing.
Yes, what a mercantile does is usually when you purchase a computer in the city of San Bernardino, the sales tax goes to the city of San Bernardino. But the way we have an agreement with the medical center is that anytime they purchase an equipment or a computer, the sales tax will come to the city of Loma Linda.
And it's on a certain amount of items, and so what looks like the agreement and the things that you guys worked out were to try to increase some of those
Yes, sir.
sales points to
Yes, sir.
increase some of that.
Yes, sir.
Here in the city.
So what we did was we looked at the current, the average 3 years of the sales tax that the city already received from the university hospital. And it's come out to be about $850,000 for the average for the last 3 years. So what we're saying is that anything exceed that $850,000 can be used to help pay for the law enforcement. And that's what the university would like to do is to use that anything extra to pay for additional law enforcement. And the goal is to have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Okay? And I would like to thank you, our staff, Jeff Bender, who twists my arm pretty good, but he's working with me, Lieutenant, and also Conrad. And also with the applicant, we have a friendly discussion and very productive discussion. And so that's my proposal. We have applicant here to answer any question. And from what I understand, we agree on what we propose on. So, okay, that's in my report. I'd be happy to answer any question.
A couple questions that I wrote down. So the sheriff, or the deputy, that's at the medical center, be based at the medical center for that time period that you're saying, right?
Yes, they will be patrol around the hospital campus, especially at night will be around the emergency department.
And that deputy, could the deputy be called to another place in the city if some other event happened that the current deputy needed help with?
Only in the emergency, yes.
But, okay.
Yes. But what's so nice about what we plan to do is have that deputy carry the radio that the security service department, university service security department can call him. So.
My understanding in how I think this was crafted was there are obviously a lot of situations that could occur where one deputy sheriff could not handle it by himself. So in that situation, our services here in the city would respond in and help stabilize the situation, such as the other night when they had the motorcycle gang member there, and pretty much everybody from the region had to respond. So once it's stabilized, then you can leave it with the assigned deputy who is part of that contract, and those resources can return to the city. Conversely, it would work the same way. It was we pay credits into that bank, they pay credits into the bank, and we all help each other. Similar to fire, how we respond into Colton and Redlands, and they respond into Loma Linda to assist us. So I think there's some freedom in that, with the understanding through the sheriff's department that person is assigned there. That is their responsibility. They handle all of the issues that arise from that plot. But if something happened, they would go either way, but we would obviously respond in too. So, correct?
Yes.
And on one of the first slides, you said backfill as needed. What can you explain that term to me?
What happened if deputy's on vacation?
Oh, okay.
They will have somebody, or calling sick, they will have somebody to replace
So
it.
that's all that meant. Okay, and then
Because we're not doing the full 24-hour-a-day model, we're having to purchase deputies at a reduced cost, which means there's no backfill built in, such as where the city, we pay a certain cost that when a deputy calls in sick or goes on vacation or gets called away, that is automatically filled by a county position, correct?
That's correct, but this does include backfill.
Okay, so really that can be left out then.
So that's what that means, it's talking about relief for vacation or sickness or whatever that kind of, okay.
Just one more point on that. In our discussion with the medical center, they have some concerns of some specific areas that would be highlighted on that deputy's daily, where extra attention would be given. And the medical center is pretty clear on what those locations, and they'll meet with the sheriff's department so everyone has a good understanding of what those top priorities are within the medical center.
And I think it's also important that we discussed this several meetings back where we talked about this being a peace officer contracted through the city. Should something change with our situation and we contract with another agency or we start our own department or something like that down the road, we have to have that flexibility. And actually prices and all that cost could change depending on that. So it shouldn't be just locked into that one particular agency, although that agency does a very good job for us, and that's who we currently employ.
And is that the case? It isn't locked into that?
Yes. That is the case. It's designed to be a contract with the city that we then subcontract of law enforcement, who at this point is the sheriff's department, but what we don't want to do is lock ourselves into one vendor.
Right, okay. And then one more question. The money that comes from the applicant for the fire service, is that tied to any certain level of thing that we have to do, or we're free to use that money in how we see fit to be able to provide fire services for the?
Yes, it will be up to the city, which include the city council decision on how we're going to spend that money, yes.
I don't know if the fire chief cares to elaborate on his staffing plan, but it's actually a fairly comprehensive plan on how to use these resources. And it actually makes quite a bit of sense with future projections that as we build out other parts of the city, we will be able to add to this piece and make a whole functioning unit. So I've had a lot of discussions with staff, including the fire chief, and they're very comfortable where this gets us, and again, anticipation that we will have some other projects and other build out that will also assist, but it'll bring us to where we need to be.
Yeah, the dollars that are in this agreement actually help us achieve a very, very key element, but also provide some additional dollars to help take some of the current burden off of some of the service delivery and equipment purchase.
I have a couple of questions, particularly on item 49, relative to the law enforcement. I'm interested in knowing why, if I understand this correctly, the city is contracting with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department and then will be reimbursed for those costs as they've been outlined in the proposal by the Loma Linda Health or the medical center, correct?
Yes.
Why is the contracting through the city and not directly between the medical center? It's their safety issue between the medical center and the law enforcement agency, whether it's San Bernardino County Sheriff or otherwise. And while I have the floor, it would seem to me that, I mean, $923,000 plus is a considerable amount of money, and I assume there's been some benchmarking to determine if we could develop our own force that are armed and can provide a similar level of security for the medical center and be able to provide the 24-hour service that we're looking for. So I guess my question is, why the city? Why are we negotiating this through the city instead of letting the university do it or medical center directly? And then the follow-up is there another model that's been considered?
Yes, the reason we would like the contract through the city is during the 6 hour they don't have the deputy, the law enforcement services have to be provided by the city. Because right now they're only 18 hours a day. So they still have 6 hours a day that somebody needs to patrol around the campus, and that will be provided by by the city. So what will happen is this way, right now, what will happen at the hospital, we have to take one of our deputies or two of our deputy go to the hospital to take care of the urgency over there. So this way we have somebody that can be there for the city to take care of their concern. And we have the people that paid for by the city to take care of the city.
Okay, so in the hours beyond the 18 that we're talking about the new deputy for, are we taking another Loma Linda deputy off the streets to provide full-time service to the medical center?
No, that person's just going to be patrol in the city. Just
But
like today.
available to
Yes.
cover the medical center?
Yes, especially for next year, we will have another deputy during the 8 hours shift. And if you look at the one that's missing for the hospital right now is part of the 6 hours during the day shift that we can help with that.
So if the medical center came back and said, it will be more cost efficient for us if we arm and retrain our security staff and then be able to provide 24-hour coverage, would that be acceptable to the city?
Because, actually, for two pieces. First, we'd want to your first question, we'd want to contract with the Sheriff's Department because that provides an integrated response. If we bring another third party in or somebody else, now we end up trying to coordinate multiple agencies, multiple dispatches, multiple radios, and it becomes problematic with a fragmented system. As far as having armed security guards, there is a very big difference between an armed security guard and a police officer.
No, I recognize
And
that.
so while we're supportive of the medical center, if they want to arm their security guards, and we think that they have an exceptional security force, there is a armed police officer is a different animal.
I think what
Completely agree with you.
Dr. Daly is thinking about is should there come a time where the university decides to develop their own police department, such as other universities have done throughout the state and throughout the country, would we be supportive of that? And I think that's what's tied into the 5-year
Yes,
review.
Such as what the VA has.
I think we'd be, if that was to go way off the reservation, some point in the future, the university decides that they want a police department, and, we have enough police officers to where we wanted a police department, a joint department wouldn't, be off the table either. But at this point, as small as both entities are, fragmenting it doesn't make sense.
And
So this is the most cost efficient.
This is probably the most cost efficient to get what we can get out of it. Because remember, the Sheriff's Department doesn't just bring patrol officers. In a worst case event, they bring a bomb squad and a homicide team and forensics and the entire tail that comes with that dog. And that's something that a small department just has a problem recreating.
No, I understand.
And if I could just add a couple comments. We do not have before us this evening the sheriff's contract. That's not a part of this discussion. Technically, that will be for a later date. The city, in requesting this contribution towards public safety for police and fire, is addressing and attempting to mitigate the impacts of this particular development. And those impact could be mitigated in different ways. The city has the right, theoretically, at a later date, if we chose to investigate that, to create our own police department, to contract with other agencies, or to make changes to an existing contract. But we're not committed to any of those steps tonight. We're simply addressing the impacts of this development and the contribution that the applicant is making towards mitigating those impacts. So there will be additional work to be done, and items will be brought forward to the council for future action to implement the steps that the city will need to take to address some of these issues in the future.
However, it's clearly implied where it says the applicant, under the conditions where the says the applicant and the city shall enter into an agreement in the form, so forth.
Well, yes, and specifically it says in the form approved by the city attorney, and I do have some concerns that I will address in the context of those agreements as they come forward. Again, just we need to keep separate for now any discussion of a final contract or the means by which the city will address the police services.
So without knowing the nature of your concerns, do you see this as something that's workable, or do you see a landmine in here that we're not aware of, or it's not feasible?
No, it is workable. Some institutions, the state colleges do have their own police departments. Other private institutions such as USC contract with local law enforcement in the form of an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, which allows the private security to exercise some law enforcement powers, arrest and so forth, on their premises but not elsewhere. So there are some things in the future that could be looked at to enhance security over and above what is provided by the city as part of our law enforcement. But again, those are...
Sure, I understand, but to get in, and I understand we're not here to talk about the agreement, but do you see condition number 49 as realistic and workable?
Yes.
Okay.
I think down the road, because what we're talking about, the bottom line here is we're not asking the medical center or LUASC to supplement public safety in the city. We are not asking for that at all. As a city, we have to determine what our levels of funding are available and what we decide to put through into those services. However, what we're asking to mitigate in these conditions of approval is their specific usage of those services and taking care of their own situation, so to speak. So I think down the road there might be a support from everyone if they were to try to form their own police department or their own fire department or whatever. However, I can tell you that the startup cost would probably be pretty great, and there's a lot of restrictions and requirements from the state as far as licensing and things like that. So, but right now, as the city attorney said, we're focusing on this. It is a condition of approval to get this project moving, and I think we need to stay on task.
I also have a question on number 50, where actually I guess I would say number 50 as well as perhaps number 49, where we talk about there will be a review and potential revision at the 5-year point. Is that calibrated with when we would be reviewing the VA hospital? Because it seems to me that we might as well be looking at them at about the same time, otherwise the negotiations can get more awkward. In other words, the first negotiation will tend to force or put pressure on the second negotiation.
The five-year standard was used first. Yeah, the VA contract goes a little bit ahead of this, so it does renew on 5 years. It's more coincidental than programmed, and sometimes we make smart mistakes. But it is a way to set a baseline for future agreements. Secondly, we looked at 5 years because in about 5 years, the reuse of the existing facility will probably be pretty well defined or on its way to being defined. And then we can really look and see what the true impacts of both buildings are.
And that all makes sense. I certainly can live with 5 years. I don't have a hang-up about that. But it also makes intuitive sense to me that if we've got two major medical institutions that are basically have similar contracts with the city, that we would negotiate them at the same time as opposed to having them staggered.
Yep, we stumbled into that, and it makes perfect sense that we stay that way. It was not done on purpose, but
oh, no, okay.
I think
it works.
I think due to the nature at the University Medical Centers on a calendar fiscal year, January to January, and the federal government operates on the July to June 30. They're gonna land about 6 months before the medical center.
Yeah,
on that
and that's what I was suspecting.
Yes.
It'd be something like. Does that make any difference to the applicant? No.
At this point, I don't know how it would affect us. I just can't necessarily predict how that may end up affecting us. Your point is very well taken, because that's an aspect that we don't know necessarily how it may end up affecting us overall. The reality of this is that you could have one entity go first, that affects the second entity, right, and at some degree handicaps how you do a negotiation in this process. So I should have introduced myself. Kerry Heinrich, Chief Executive Officer, Loma Linda University Medical Center. When appropriate, I have some other questions, but I'll wait till the council has had a chance to review their questions.
And my point is only if it doesn't appear to be a handicap for you, then it's not something that I'm going to worry about.
Would you more be worried about the city, though? I mean, fundamentally?
Potentially.
Okay. I just hope that we're all focused here on what's.
Of course. No, I'm just suggesting that there be some parity and a level playing field.
We would certainly be willing to adjust this such that our renewal is coterminous with the VA renewal, such that they're both then at that point on the same track. So we could have the first term be 4 years and 6 months, whatever that would be, and thereafter it would renew on 5-year terms. And so then the VA and the medical center would be on the same track together.
And that's what I was thinking.
So.
And then just to ensure I understand condition number 51, that the average income through the sales taxes from the medical center at this point is about $850,000, is that correct? And that if that tax, any money exceeding that $850,000 per year would go to offset or contribute to some of the costs that we've been discussing.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just want to be sure I understood that.
That's not correct. It would be additional. It would go to offset additional costs, correct? It would go to offset additional funding for that increase from 18-hour to 24-hour law enforcement. That's not going to offset the current costs that we're talking about.
It will do both. So everything above 850,000 can be, or whatever that, is that 850? Yes. Whatever that number is, can be either applied to increasing the level of service, either more law enforcement or fire services as the needs arise, or to pay down part of the existing burden. The idea is that there's a mechanism there that the institution can recapture some of the sales tax and get that back into the city, get the activities here, and incentivize them to use the mercantile for what it's for.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's all my questions for now.
One more question. I'm still kind of confused on these dates, on 49 and 51. Why is 49 the date for law enforcement, July 15, next month? And then in number 50, the fire, why does that start January 2017? I'm confused why those are different dates and why they're starting so fast if the building isn't for 3 years.
It's the law enforcement, it seemed like we want it now. And so with the fire department, well, it's really cash flow, and that's what I understand. It's cash flow on the hospital side that they need some little cushion time to pay for.
And from an operational perspective, once construction starts, there is law enforcement impacts in the parking lots, traffic around there, and then the continued impact of what's going on there. The true fire impact probably won't start until after they start doing construction and there's something there to burn. So there's a little bit of a stagger just from an operational perspective.
The principal distinction for July 15 versus January 1 is we haven't budgeted for any of this, and it was a way to help us try to achieve some compromise on this issue because we have not budgeted for any of these dollars. So you've essentially taken and split it 60-40. We have an immediate need for law enforcement. We'll pick up for the cost for that now. We don't have as pressing a need on the construction project for fire suppression or support, because it's just a hole in the ground right now. There's really nothing to burn. But it helped us from a budget standpoint to be able to defer that until January of 2017.
Good. Okay, would the applicant like to go next?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to express appreciation on behalf of the institution to staff for the city, Jarb and Conrad, for real effort put into this, and it's very much appreciated on behalf of the institution. Thank you. Really, two questions that I have that I think we could probably work out directly with staff. The first is really, and this is an extremely important point to the institution, I would never suggest I understand the way law enforcement should deploy and how that should be structured, but from a layperson's perspective, and I walk the halls of the hospital every day, it's not as beneficial. In fact, it would be significantly less beneficial to the institution if the officer were in a patrol car. Certainly they should have a patrol car so they can respond as necessary if they need to deal with other issues that may arise across campus or across the city. But from our perspective, the greatest value of this additional law enforcement officer is to physically walk within the building itself, to physically walk from the emergency department up onto the units, particularly in cases where there is gang violence that is occurring, not so much in the building, hopefully never, but we deal with the after effects of gang violence with both sides appearing. And our greatest concern is that we have the deputy physically in the structure itself. That's where the visibility, I think, will be most beneficial, as opposed to an officer in a car that would patrol the campus. So that's one of the things I would like to clarify further, and we'll work that out in the actual agreement itself. Certainly looking for law enforcement to give us advice and counsel on how to best structure that.
Sure, absolutely. That will not be a problem. Our current patrols involve both patrol of the vehicle and foot patrols, depending on what the circumstances call for.
Right. Thank you. That's helpful. The last point that I would make here, and again, I think we can work this out, what I had thought is that we were going to agree on the law enforcement side to an annual CPI adjustment as opposed to directly tying to wages and benefits. The reason for that is it's just something that we can't budget for. I understand you can't either. We would be willing to incorporate an annual CPI adjustment into that, which may not necessarily track with the exact salary and benefit adjustments that may be applicable on any given year for law enforcement. We're simply trying to approach it this way from a budgetary standpoint so that we can look and say, well, CPI is projected to be X. We'll build X into our budget as we project for this.
Yes, I think we can work with you on that. And again, with regard to the law enforcement, is in addition to pay for deputy, it's not include pay for the gasoline or maintenance.
Sure, of course.
What we can do is we can average what we pay them for the last 3 years, and this way you have exact numbers.
Understood.
For your budgeting purposes.
We understand the amount for direct gas and maintenance. That's just going to be billed. The wages and benefits, that's more subject to variation based upon the contract that ultimately gets negotiated. And for budgetary purposes, it would help us to just do an annual CPI so that we have predictability to some extent with regard to that. And we can work that out.
That's something we can discuss in the context of the agreement.
Yeah, it's good. Good. With that, again, we are supportive of this. I think it is an effort to try to address the real issues that the city has. We're sensitive to those. We want to be good citizens. And this is an effort. It's roughly $1.5 million that the institution is putting forward to try to address both fire and public safety issues. And we are supportive of this. I'm glad to answer any other questions council members may have.
Okay, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I would like to now open this up for public comment. Should any member of the public wish to speak, you are invited up. We would ask that you come up one at a time, state your name and address for the record, and we will allot you a couple of minutes, not forever, but hopefully we can move this pretty quickly and then get to down to the meat of it. Sir?
Steve Nemo, Loma resident. Trump will be president, and he clearly said that if these nations don't play along, he's going to raise the taxes. So initially, that means the materials and products will rise. Has the hospital thought about this? Because say that does get passed through, the taxes will rise. Has they set a budget to cover the rise in taxes? Because if they can't, mid-construction, it stops.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's their own internal, projection that they have to focus on, and I'm sure that they've probably thought a lot of that out pretty securely. That's not something that's in front of us for discussion. So,
Just like to put that out there. Thank you.
all right, sir. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing none, we will close the public comment, and I will entertain a motion from the council.
I will move precise plan of design number 15-128 for approval.
And
Do
that
we need
includes
more
the
than that?
resolution that.
The amended, the proper language on the amended
Full
resolutions?
resolution here.
Yes. I don't have the number on that, but
As submitted by staff?
yeah, subject to the conditions of approval and the findings. Yes.
That'll work?
I'll second it with a question. The two items that were just brought up, the deployment of the officer and the CPI versus the other, can we vote that? And then how are we doing that? Because is that something you can just add in later, or do we have to put that in here now if we want to consider that?
I'm
or
not
what?
comfortable on voting on that. I think those are staff discussions, and I don't think we are here to dictate how that type of stuff gets implemented. At least that's not what's in front of us. Those things are not in front of us to discuss. So I believe they have to be negotiated through staff and through the city attorney, but I'm not comfortable on voting on anything like that.
We'll definitely address those with the applicant, and it will come back at a later date with the formal agreement for your final approval.
Okay, great.
Speaking of which, because we're looking at some fast approaching dates, so are we looking for a formal agreement approval before July because of the issue, or we can start moving ahead with that?
No, they will have their approval tonight if you so vote. Some of these details are going to take a little time to finalize.
But it doesn't mess with the timeline at all. Okay, so I have a first and is that a second then? Do we need to do a roll call vote, or is it just an informal process? Okay, with that being said, we have first and a second, and I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 And it carries unanimously. Congratulations. Okay, we will move on to reports of councilmen.
I would just like to say thanks both to the city and to the applicant. They started out quite a ways apart, and through hard work over this last week came to an agreement, and I just appreciate the hard work you all put in to kind of come to an agreement that everybody's happy with, and I just good community spirit, and I appreciate it on all ends.
I'll echo that. You know, I was a big force in moving a lot of this because of my passion for public safety, and I see things from a different lens that sometimes other people don't quite see or see the way I see, and I have of renewed faith that we have accomplished something very positive here and that is a benefit to everyone involved. Truly, the umbrella, the Luask umbrella, can truly say that they really are a world-class organization, and they do truly care about the citizens of this community. I appreciate their effort. I appreciate the city's effort. Moving forward, I'm sure we'll continue to have discussions as I don't see the world improving too much, but and that's unfortunate. But I think we're moving forward in a good position as a city and for our residents. Ron, anything to add?
No, I'll just echo what's already been said. Job well done. It's what I expected would happen. Thank you. Okay, reports of officers. No reports from any officers, and that will conclude our meeting for tonight, and I will adjourn this session of the City Council. Thank you for showing up.